Well, this is the last week before the Supreme Court goes on hiatus, so we may see several rulings on key cases on Monday. And we may hear key decisions on the separation of church and state and the actions of U.S. Border Patrol. The High Court will also decide whether to hear arguments relating to the president's travel ban. Seth Berenzweig, an attorney and managing partner at Berenzweig Leonard Law Firm, helps to break all the cases down for us. Okay, Seth, I want to start with this Trinity Church case. What's it about?
Well, the Trinity Church case is a very interesting case that has to do with separation of powers. In this case, a church in Missouri created a playground for children that had shredded tires, and then they applied to the state of Missouri for a grant to help simply cover that cost so the children can be safe. They placed very high on the grid of being able to be eligible for the grant, but the state of Missouri rejected that because they said that if they were going to help pay for that playground, that they would have what's known as excessive entanglements with a religious institution. So therefore, we have a very interesting constitutional issue of how this breaks down in separation of church and state.
And Seth, there's another case. It's called Hernandez versus Mesa, and it deals with a Border Patrol agent who shot a Mexican citizen. Why do you think this ruling will be important?
Well, I think it's critical because this is going to help define the constitutional parameters that surround Border Patrol agents along the southern border of the United States. This is a very interesting and unique constitutional issue. The Supreme Court's going to have to wrestle with this because you have a Border Patrol agent on the American side of the border shooting tragically a child, a young boy who is a Mexican citizen on the other side of the border. Traditionally, people who are outside of the United States usually don't have the guarantees of constitutional protection. So this is a very highly charged and very controversial case as well.
And Seth, the court's also going to be deciding which cases it's going to hear in its next session, and that means they'll also be looking at the president's travel ban. If they decide to actually take this case, what will that mean?
Well, the Supreme Court this week has to unpack two critical issues on the Trump travel ban case. In the short run, they are deciding right now, and will be announcing any day, whether it's going to accept the government's argument for an immediate lift of the injunction to allow the travel ban to be in place during the pendency of the appeal. I think the government winning on that argument is unlikely because the legal standard is hard. The longer-term issue is whether the Supreme Court has the 4 justices to vote to accept the case. I think that although the court will probably not lift the ban on the injunction and will support that as the status quo, the Supreme Court will likely accept this for oral argument. This is going to be a major constitutional showdown. The administration is going to have a tough time in the long term. They've been hit with various decisions on separate grounds of why the executive order is unconstitutional. The Ninth Circuit just a few days ago also criticized the president for his tweet where he said that this is in fact a travel ban and not a pause. So the administration has a number of hurdles ahead.
So, Seth, if they decide not to hear the case, what do you think that would say?
Well, if the court decides to not hear the case, and that is really quite possible because they may conclude that this case is moot. They may say, look, you've had your 90 days by the time the fall comes around, and therefore it's dismissed as moot. That would be a huge setback for the administration. In that instance, you'd have 2 separate federal appellate courts, one on the East Coast and one on the West Coast, that for separate reasons deems the travel ban unconstitutional. Therefore, if and when the president comes back after the internal review and tries to institute another travel ban, it's almost certainly going to get pounced upon by critics. So the stakes on this case are extremely high for the administration.
I'm also curious about Justice Anthony Kennedy. A lot of people are buzzing. Will he retire? He's, of course, considered a key swing vote in the court. What are you hearing, Seth?
Well, I think that there's really a watch on Justice Kennedy and also Justice Ginsburg. These highly respected judges are over 80 years of age. They may want to retire. We are really now generally at a 5-4 point for the conservatives in the Supreme Court, with Justice Kennedy known traditionally as the swing vote. If there's any change on the Supreme Court, it's going to have a profound effect on the court and a profound impact on constitutional analysis and the resolution of cases that affect America coast to coast. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. It's not clear that Justice Kennedy is really set to retire right now, but certainly people are expecting that President Trump will have a significant impact on the composition of the Supreme Court in the coming years.
Can you imagine over 80 years and continuing to serve your country and uphold justice? That's pretty impressive.
You bet.
Seth Berenzweig, thank you for joining us, Seth.
My pleasure.